in heaven, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful for this opportunity we have to meet together this hour to try to glean more from your word. Pray, Father, as we study today about what you would have us to do as being citizens in your kingdom. We pray, Father, that we would take these messages within our heart and learn to be better Christians than we have in the past and always move forward. Be with us through this hour and day and throughout our lives. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we finished up on the question at the end, and that is, if Jesus did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, would it not follow that the Ten Commandments are still binding, and therefore Christians should keep the Sabbath day today? Okay, so everyone has a book, right? Okay. Nope. What? I'm sorry.
43, is that one you're talking about?
On page 43, the last question, thought question about the Sabbath day. And the argument is he didn't destroy the old law, he fulfilled it. Therefore, should we be keeping the Sabbath today? So, I had several arguments written down in my book, but asked my professor while without it this morning. So I'm got a blank book. So we'll do what we can do. Okay. What do you think? Should we be keeping the Sabbath today? Sherilyn.
Colossians 2, give my glasses on so I can see. 14. Oh, okay. Yeah. It starts in 14, but 16 does it. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of holiday or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. It's on the blotting the handwriting of the ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it away, nailed it to the cross. 14, and then it goes down and gets specific in 16.
Okay. In 16, therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to festivals, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day, things which were a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Okay. So, according to Paul, writing to Colossians, Christ has authority over all these things and nailed them to the cross. When he died on the cross, that was the end of Sabbath day worship. Anyone else? Anyone else have a scripture or a thought on Sabbath day worship? Frank.
If you put in your mind the reason the Sabbath was established, it was set aside as a time when the Jew would not do anything that had to do with the cares and affairs of life. They were to, if you remember back when he gave the manna, he said you gather for 6 days, for 6 days, 5 days, and on the 6th day you gather a double portion, so that on the Sabbath day you wouldn't have to worry about getting manna. You were to sit in your tent and you were to appreciate, take in, reach out, whatever, to appreciate the relationship that you had with God. When you turn over to Hebrews chapter 5 and the institution of the new covenant, Jeremiah 31 says, I'm going to write my law in their heart and in their mind, and nobody will say, know the Lord, because everybody's going to know him. I suggest that the Sabbath in today's world is an everyday practice. Now, with regard to what the question is, it's a leading question. I don't know that we are supposed to set aside a day that we commune with the Lord, because every day in the Christian dispensation is a communion with the Lord. We don't, it's like an old country song, you don't go to church on Sunday and then be a hypocrite on Monday. So Chris wants to help me.
Okay. Basically, it is a set aside to not think about material things of the world, to get your mind spiritual things.
I think Frank is exactly right. Maybe if we change the discussion from do we set aside Saturday as a day of worship to the Sabbath as a principle that tells us some important things about the nature of God, about the nature of His creation. That He Himself rested after His work. That He Himself created us, not just for work, not just for, as our society would tell us, not just for consumption and spending of money, but for connection, for fellowship with Him. And it's easy for us, it's easy for us to lose sight of that.
Anyone else? Jared?
I turned to Acts 15, which we're not talking about the Sabbath day here, but the concept is the same. Essentially, in the early church, you have this struggle of Jewish people being converted to this new way, but then the introduction of Gentiles being brought into the same the same unity with the Jews, and so there was this kind of natural clash of expectations and traditions and things like that. In Acts 15, it says that they had no small dissension and debate, and that they had to kind of discuss some of these concepts. And in 7 it says, there had been much debate. Peter stood up and said to them, brothers, you know that in the early days God made a choice among you, that by my mouth the Gentiles should hear the word of the gospel and believe. And God, who knows the heart, bore witness to them by giving them the Holy Spirit, just as He did to us. And He made no distinction between us and them, having cleansed their hearts by faith. Now therefore, why are you putting God to the test by placing the yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither our fathers nor we have, of disciples that neither our fathers nor we have been able to bear? But we believe that we will be saved through the grace of our Lord Jesus, just as they will. And again, I realize this isn't talking about the Sabbath. It's talking about circumcision being necessary for salvation. But the idea that they were struggling with this, and that it seems that the argument was a little more general than that. The argument was God brought these people who were not raised in our customs and traditions and rules into the same faith that we now have. Therefore, we have to understand that those customs, rules, and traditions don't apply in certain ways. That's what I got from that, at least. With the Sabbath day, being able to apply that to the ritualistic observance of the Sabbath day. Perhaps not what Frank and Chris were talking about, the idea of resting after work and understanding the nature of God and things like that. I think that's separate. I'm just talking about the ritualistic behavior here. It seems that that's not quite, it seems that it's not expected in the same way.
That's a good point, Jared. And even in Acts 15, we're talking about circumcision, we're talking about the food laws. It's not that he's telling Jewish Christians not to do that stuff anymore. He's just telling them they can't bind it on Gentile believers.
Well, one beauty of us having the Bible, God's holy inspired word, it directs us to apostolic example, and Christ led them to that example at His latter days up here on
in the flesh as he were here on the earth. And we can turn to Acts 20 and verse 7. As we often reference that, we can turn to 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2, as when they gathered together on the first day of the week. And we find that putting away, as Frank brought out in Hebrews, the old law, and committing to the new covenant that we have with God, is changing their mindset from the fleshly, spiritual sacrifices more to a spiritual sacrifice, as Paul alluded to the Romans.
Yeah, all through Acts, not only in 15, but in other places in the letters where Judaizing teachers were warned against. They warned, apparently, every small church in every community, there were some Jews who wanted to add something on the back of the Gentiles and constantly had to be corrected not to do that. And of course, you think of Pentecost was on the first day of the week. And that was the first sermon, first baptism, the first Lord's Supper. Everything happened that we do in worship on that day of Pentecost. And it's just really odd that it wasn't on the seventh day, it was on the first day of the week, not the seventh.
What? It may not have been the first baptism.
Oh yeah, the first baptism I'm speaking of, the first baptism by Christians to make Christians, to fulfill the obedience that he did in Acts 2:38. Yes. Okay, yeah, it's not the first baptism. John baptized also. Okay. The next lesson continues on this same thing, and that is, how did the Jews, the Pharisees specifically, and the scribes, twist, change, elaborate on, add to or subtract from the law of Moses? And the first one is divorce. On page 44. How had the Pharisees twisted the law of Moses on the question of divorce? What'd they do? Did they extend it or shorten it or what? Take away from it or add to it?
Laws now, they call it no fault. For whatever reason, you just give your spouse a letter saying, we're divorced.
Yeah, they use the word that, what is it, uncleanness or defilement? They changed the word divorce, or not changed the word divorce, but applied it to defiling the woman being defiled, the woman being unclean. And then they said, there's other ways the woman could be unclean. No fault divorce. She could be unclean about it like this. She could be defiled like this. There are different ways that she could, but the odd thing that I picked up on this, and he doesn't mention it, was always the woman. The woman never was able to say, okay, the man's defiled. I'm writing him a certificate of divorce. That didn't work the other way. Now, what did Jesus say about this? Yeah, it really didn't want this letter of, what is it called? Certificate of divorce. Really wasn't in his plan. Why? What did God want? One woman, one man, till death do us part. He didn't want them to split up, ever, for any reason. He did allow it for fornication.
The hardness of the heart.
Right, the hardness of the heart. The husband would have trouble in his heart forgiving his wife. And for that reason, built up enmity between the husband and the wife would render the marriage a continual war. So for that reason, you can split up. That's it.
We still have to be careful how we handle that word, even the joining together, as we may not completely grasp what that means, because the Bible tells us that let no man put asunder what God hath joined together. And it's like once we are rooted together, there's only death that can separate us, or and we often look for the what ifs rather than to how can we stay together. And yet when we're joined to the church, we can look at that same concept in the spiritual connotation as we do as a husband and wife being joined together. And these scribes and Pharisees, they find it easy to maneuver around, as he calls it, the loopholes, and that's what our society looks for, is loopholes. Versus how can we do how can we keep our back? And the writer gets into that later on too.
Yeah, this is something hard to come by in this day and age, and that's commitment. It's a sad situation. They can't commit. They can't commit for a long time like that. And again, one thing I didn't mention, he said something else, added on to that, what did he say? You cause the woman to sin, and you cause the man who marries her to sin. It's not just you get rid of your wife, and you get to go on and get married to someone younger, usually. You cause them to sin. How do you cause them to sin?
She becomes an adulteress.
All right, she becomes an adulteress. I guess she could just remain unmarried, but that's not usually the case. She becomes an adulteress when she marries, and the person she's married to
Becomes an adulterer
because that marriage never was severed. That bond,
It's all because of this dude back here.
It's a tangled web. It really is. When you get into that, it gets really tangled. And it's, this day and age, it's hard to get out of that. It really is, because you've got so much invested. Any other comments? Yes, I believe.
Over the years, why is it we are not teaching our young people this? We've got off track. Because if they marry, I mean, they seem to want, we understand this when we're reading it, but when we start living it out, then there's loopholes. Everybody's trying to reach for something. And it seems to be clearer the older we get. But when we first read it, it's clear. We have no problem with it. But we get all these mixed up, trying to make it, especially if it's in your family, you're trying to find a way out. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, trying to find a way out. Yeah, trying to find a loophole.
Why, even our young people here, how many lessons have they heard on marriage and divorce from the standpoint of believing it, not just, married, and then, you see what I'm saying? It is not embedded there.
Yeah, it's hard. I realize it's hard. It's hard to remember when I was a teenager, but remembering back, it's good to know what you've been taught and understand it. But it's a totally different thing that's when you're not involved with anyone. But when you get involved with someone and you get married and it gets hard and the going gets rough and it gets tough, that's when this gets to be I'm looking for a loophole because I can't handle this.
Marriage is not something you fix. You don't go into it gonna fix it. You better be fixed before you do it or you don't do it. You gotta fix it. It's not something that you go into gonna fix it.
Right. Some of them girls want to find a fixer-upper. I can fix him. He's a little rough on the edges, but I can clean him up. And I'm sorry, but that's not always possible. These hard-headed guys are sometimes pretty stubborn in their ways. Cynthia.
It's ill-advised to expect the congregation, the preacher, to teach the young people this. This is, it's not wrong by any means, should be a part, but where are the parents in this? And where are we, even as young people? You know, you've got to expect the Bible to be read and studied, and nothing in our lives should we wait until that decision faces us to know who we are and where we are. You don't wait, when Ken Wilber used to say, you don't wait till you're invited to a keg party to decide if you're going to be in places like that or if you're going to drink when you get there. Those decisions have to be made long before that. And so that's where I hold to the trust and faith that our Christian parents are doing this, and there are kids that don't have Christian parents, but they have their Bible and hopefully Bible classes that will be giving them direction long before they need to make that decision.
Yeah, we've got basically, like in baseball, 3 strikes. We've got the preacher, we've got our Bible classes, and we've got our parents. If we strike out all 3, woe unto us. Yes, Chris.
I want to speak in absolute terms maybe, but like marriage is something that has to be modeled. Like the modeling of it is more important in some ways than the teaching of it. You know, if you get what I'm saying.
Extremely agree, yes.
And at least in the course of my lifetime, you know, we live in a church and in a larger society where those models are harder and harder and harder to come by.
Yeah, the examples that we need to follow. My parents were attempted to not show us any disagreement between my mother and father. That they felt that we didn't need to see that. So their arguments were after we went to bed at night. We never heard them. We grew up thinking marriage is easy. Marriage is, you know, mom and dad did it without a problem in the world. Everything went smoothly. We didn't know because they didn't let us know. It might have been good for seeing an argument or two. Jerry.
I think you hit on something there. We're right that modeling marriage is important and things like that. I think in your case, when did you get married?
I was.
Put you on the spot.
28. I was older.
But what year?
1973.
73. So the highest divorce rate in the history of the United States was in the 80s.
Was in what?
In the 80s.
80s.
So people getting married, having seen their parents, you know, maybe not arguing as much, things like that. So we could probably see some bad modeling and things there. But what we're reading here is a systemic educational system that has taught a distortion of God's word. when what Jesus is talking about.
Yeah,
He's having to essentially attack the system and say, this is what you've been taught your whole life. You guys have come up with this whole process for figuring it out. You need to get recentered on understanding the nature of God and understanding the nature of marriage in God's eyes. And that's what he's really focusing on. Not, let me tell you guys how to have a Bible study program about marriage and divorce. Not let me tell you how to model marriage and divorce. Yeah, he's just saying you need to get your brains wrapped around a bigger concept here first. All that other stuff filters down from that.
All right. Paul.
I think just about every generation thinks the next generation is a whole lot worse. But I'd like to comment the coming generation. I think when we were younger, the exception that you mentioned here, when that did occur, even in the church, they got divorced. There wasn't much getting back together. But, exception doesn't mean it's necessary. So I think the younger generation in the church seems to be trying to reconcile marriages, even where the exception comes into play. Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, I commend it.
Yeah. Build back. It's tough to build back that trust, but it can be done. It can be done, especially if it's true repentance is shown. But again, it's one of the toughest things in the world to fix. The next kingdom righteousness that he's talking about is applied to oaths. Now, I don't know that I personally see this much happening today, that people making oaths, not like they did then. Why were oaths necessary? Why did they have them in the first place? So more so back then, you think? No. But they had to have some way to guarantee he's telling the truth. So they swore. Now, Christ says, you've got a problem with what you're swearing on, too. You're swearing by or on what? What was his problem with what they were swearing on or by?
That they had no control of.
Right. Because?
Well, I can't swear by heaven because God's in charge of heaven. I can't send you to hell. I can't say you go to hell because I don't have the power to send you to hell, except by my unrighteous living. And then your root may go rotten, and then you fall from grace. But I didn't necessarily make that happen. You lost control. What we have control of is our word. And it's like Sister Cynthia said, we learn before we go out with our rowdy buddies that we're not going to drink. That is our word, in our heart. If it's a mortgage, we sign it, we do our best to pay the note every month. That's an oath. Or if we're speaking of the wedding vow, that's an oath. So things we can control versus things that we have no control of. I think that's the way that we have to look at it, because we're confronted every day with things that we don't have any control of.
He was mentioning some of the things that they were swearing by, and I kind of got tickled at some of the stuff. By the hair on your head. And Jesus said, who created your head? Who created the hair on your head? is there anything you can swear by that God doesn't have a hand in? And his point was no, because that was what the Pharisees were saying. They're saying, well, you're not supposed to swear by something God had direct hand in. So you can't swear by heaven or stuff like that, but you can swear by your head. But what did they need to swear in the first place? Why did they need to swear? There was something the Pharisees were letting get by. Why did they have to swear in the first place? Because they lied, right? And I got the feeling they swore by something small so that they could plan later to not do it. They were swearing with the intention of not doing what they're swearing by in the first place. That was what he really got fired up about. And that's what the Pharisees were allowing. It's almost like the Catholic tradition of I'll pay my dues or whatever, I'll pay this fine or fee, and that will allow me to go out on Saturday night and do what I want to do. And the next week, I'll pay it again, and I can go out on Saturday night and do what I want to do. It sounds very much like that. Mark.
The writer talks about looking at the intent of the law. What's the purpose behind it to begin with, instead of trying to find a way out of it or how to get around it. And so in Matthew 23, Jesus called them blind guides. And because they were trying to make themselves to appear like they were the righteous ones. In verse 23 of 23, it tells them, he says, woe to you. He says, for you pay tithe and mint and anise and cumin, and yet have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. And so the Pharisees and the scribes were, as we would say in our common culture today, when you take and get a license or a certificate, that is the least amount of things that are required by you to own that certificate. And that to me is that you can do more, in other words. But yet when it comes to the law, they try to do the very least they had to, and yet failed miserably by going under that. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about what he's trying to get them to understand here is, it's not the law he's trying to change or alter. He says, but you just don't get the intent of it. You just don't fully understand what the intent of the original law was.
Yeah, he did. Real loud is down here, kingdom righteousness as it applies to retaliation. Now, what is this retaliation about? What in the Old Testament is he talking about? Retaliation. Yeah, that's the thing he brings up right away. An eye for, it was in the Old Testament, so it must be right. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What was the problem with retaliation in the first place? What is there problems about retaliation? Yes.
They were using it for revenge against something that they felt against someone.
Yeah, the retaliation was for revenge for something personally, something that was done to them, so they need to be able to do it to the other person. And the problem with that is, what did Jesus say the problem with that is? If you use this retaliation for personal revenge, what is the problem with that?
Our anger, our violence does not work the purposes of God.
That's not, in fact, we're not authorized to be God's avenging hand. Revenge is God's. Retaliation is God's purview. What is it, whittling on his side of the stick when we do that? That's not for us to do. That's not our place. Any other comments?
We're mistaken.
Yeah, if we're not all-knowing, God is. Yeah. What if they really didn't do it or somebody else did it?
That's the reason they had the sanctuary cities in the Old Testament where they could flee to
Yeah.
avoid having revenge.
Yeah, we're in dangerous situations when we go off and retaliate when we really don't know everything that's going on in a situation. That's one of the problems with use of deadly force with our police officers. They don't always know if that person had a gun in their hand and had intent to use it. They don't always know. Sometimes if they have to react so quickly, that may not have been a gun in their hand. There was an instance where the person had a hairbrush in his hand and was killed for a hairbrush. So we can't, it's really not our place to exact revenge.
Well, and there is a distinct difference between punishment and revenge.
Correct.
And I think sometimes those lines blur a little bit. We have a tendency sometimes to let certain things go that should be punished. But then at the same time, as those problems continue to grow, it almost becomes a revenge type justice instead of a just and righteous punishment. So I think we have to be careful between distinguishing between the two.
I like what he has on page, let's see what page this is, 46. And in verse 40 to 42, he lists 4 things. And I like this. It's better to turn the other cheek than to strike back with evil intent. If a man unjustly sues you for your coat, it is better to give him your cloak than to wrong him or withhold what he really needs. And he takes that even to people who are asking you for things, asking you for a favor, asking you for some kind of alms. It's better to give him more than just what he asked for. 3, it is better to go 2 miles with a man who has wrongfully compelled you to assist him than to fail to give him what he truly requires. Again, going an extra mile, that phrase, doing more than what he needs. He feels he needs something from you. It's better to give him extra. And in 4, it is better to give a loan to a man who has treated you badly than to withhold what he actually lacks in his time of trouble. Love your enemies. And that's, well, I'm getting into, let me see now. Yeah, I'm getting into the next one. Didn't mean to say that. Cancel that out. I didn't say that. I jumped into the next one. But I like that as really being specific. If we have the right heart, we're giving this person a little more than what he needs, a little more than what he asks for, a little more than he maybe demands, if we've got the right heart. Any comments? Yes, I believe.
I was just sitting here thinking about, it's just the nature of man to want to get back. That's his nature. Look on the TV every night, the road rage, what is happening out of,
Oh, man.
they're killing one another. Instead of letting it go, let the man pull out and hold. And a man's not going to do that. That's a male for you right there, more than a female.
Testosterone. Let's just say it.
I'm just saying, I think that falls under a male, and then a female, I'm not saying a female won't do it, but they were not about that, let that male switch over that lane and get in front of them. No way. You see what I'm saying? Because it's on the news every night. Some goes to jail for it, some are killed, and then, you know, over a minute of rage. Lack of control, self-control. I guess that's what it is.
And if you watch the news, I'm not saying the news itself, but if you watch the news, look and see how many lawyer commercials there are saying, we'll help you get your revenge. We'll help you get back what they took. We'll help you do this. We'll help you do that for a fee. A lot of that. All right, the last one is applying to loving your enemies. You have heard Moses said that you shall love your neighbor as thyself. Now, how'd the Pharisees twist this one? How'd they mess with this little statement? Jews only. Neighbors implied, oh, that's the people that live next door to you, and they're Jews, and you're Jew, and so you're good to the Jews. You'll love the Jews. You do what you can for them. What did that exclude? Everybody else. Them other people, them Gentiles, you can hate them. They're your enemies. Were they used to doing that? Think about the Old Testament. Were they used to warring against all of the people that weren't Jews as a nation? So, what did Jesus say? What was his, how did he straighten them out?
Special to love your friends. Everybody does that.
Yeah, everybody does that. He mentioned some really low lives. He mentioned tax collectors. Even tax collectors do that, and they're lowest of the low. You know, even pagans do that don't even worship God. They do that. You got to be better. Any other comments? We are almost, the doors are opening, the time's up. Any other comments on loving your enemies? Okay, we'll get the questions, and what I had planned to do was just the fill in the blanks and the application. We'll skip the true false. I read some of them. We don't want to go there. As Joyce Dunn says, true false, his are pretty bad. So we'll skip them. Okay, my wife says not to say the author's pretty bad. I would say his question selection on the true false is not too good. The way he wrote them.